the journey to become self-aware and self-realized, one must always confront one's shadow unconscious if the opposites of good and evil are to be reconciled. Quote from Jung, "The fight against the paralyzing grip of the unconscious calls forth man's creative powers. That is the source of all creativity, but it needs heroic courage to do battle with these forces and to wrest from them the treasure hard to attain." End quote. The treasure hard to attain is usually associated with the archetypal self. When two men fall in love and have projected the soul twin onto each other, they are bound to the self and suffused with inspiration. They feel they can accomplish anything, as the I Ching notes, quote, "They shatter even the strength of iron or bronze," end quote. The most valuable potential of such a bond is the psychological growth of the partners. It is such a relationship. Shadows can be brought out and conquered, thus not only overcoming the problems which always arise in intimate friendship, but feeding individuation, the integration of psyche to itself in the light of God. This is the theme modeled by Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the manly lovers, by entering on their quest. Through the magic of partnership, Gilgamesh is brought to face his split-off shadow in the form of the giant Humbaba. When Gilgamesh has faced Enkidu in the bride's doorway, he was confronted by his own bullish ignorance and instinctuality, his crudely phallic libido for the first time. In Humbaba, he reaches a much deeper, more primordial form, correspondingly ugly and ferocious. He is helped to get there through his 3 dreams in the cedar forest, prospective messages from the unconscious, each closer to the shadow, each talked out with Enkidu to untie its meaning. Facing a nightmare of the psyche is horrendous, but with the help of Enkidu and Shamash, Gilgamesh does so. To face the shadow part of oneself in the light of consciousness and understanding, to feel the terror, but not to run away, renders the shadow powerless, beheads it, and then it can be integrated. The cedar forest made accessible for treeless Uruk. This is a principle used to great effect in psychotherapy, here obtained through romantic friendship. The prior sterility of the king's rule is reversed. The fecundity of the sacred marriage is fulfilled. Gilgamesh is now a hero. He has gained a proud identity for himself, grounded in love, centered on the star of heaven, guaranteed by the Lord of the Sun. He has achieved a further stage on the road to the Lord of the deep waters. So that's that section, which is called the Sacred Marriage and Fight with Humbaba. And that obviously has to do with Mitch's ability to tie together Plato's concept of eros in a homosexual form and show that both Gilgamesh and Enkidu are further strengthened through their relationship, and begins to sort of approximate what coming out as a gay identified person does to consolidate the personality. It creates enormous strength where before there was chaos and confusion and a lack of understanding. But just like the gay community currently is trapped in, let's say, the first stage of the individuation process, which calls maybe the white stage, or the stage of gay identification, there's another stage yet to go that most folks, including many of us, are still resisting, which we call the second stage of gay liberation, the psychological stage. And it looks like now Gilgamesh and Enkidu are to actually go on a deeper initiation in this section called The Bull of Heaven and the Loss of the Soul. So I have 2 more sections to read. I want to make sure that I end by 9 or so that we can have some questions and answers. And I'm speeding up my pace a little bit just to make sure that I read the whole paper and we get a chance to talk. The Bull of Heaven and the Loss of the Soul. To join with the soul twin and enter on the quest of psychic initiation brings profound change to the whole of the inner world. The ego gains a bond with the self and thereby begins to feel its divine nature and power. Such an elevation of the ego creates a state of inflation, quote, in which something small, the ego, has arrogated to itself the qualities of something larger, the self, and hence it's blown up beyond the limits of its proper size, end quote. It's Edinger. This new psychic imbalance brought on by heroic success, the development of a gay identity, triggers in its turn a compensatory reaction from the spirit world, as earlier Enkidu was formed in response to Gilgamesh's kingly irresponsibility. In this way, quote, every psychological extreme secretly contains its opposite. Individuation is a cyclical process of give and take between conscious and unconscious, and now it is to turn again for Gilgamesh. It's probably one of the basic ideas of Mitch's analysis taken from Jungian literature, that actually a psychological life is made up of a series of inflations and deflations. And that's the breaking of the Judeo-Christian myth, and that relationship with the shadow ongoingly, and through the shadow relationship with the soul, is a cyclical process that involves each of us in the process of initiation and self-realization. That's the main idea, and that's homosexual in many interesting ways. The godlike beauty of the king, outward expression of his inner achievement in libidinal transformation, seduces the goddess of love herself. But Gilgamesh, elevated to the level of divinity, now behaves as if he were a god, scorning mighty Ishtar, showing up her bad traits. Such an act is blasphemous in the Mesopotamian context, where the king unites ritually with a representative of the goddess each year to renew the land and the state. Such arrogant self-inflation the Greeks called hubris, and it brings about a downfall. On the other hand, Gilgamesh has been traveling to the shaman's road and thereby has gained a certain measure of true individuality, of self-awareness. He has begun to differentiate from the mass of people unconscious of themselves. From this point of view, to reject Ishtar's advance, quote, the hero's renunciation of the terrible Ishtar, and quote from Jung, is to reconfirm his commitment to Enkidu and the road of knowledge. In a way. To follow his own way of becoming, not merely the traditional road laid out for him, the way of instinct. Aided by Shamash, Gilgamesh was able to overcome Humbaba. Now he believes he is strong enough to overcome the will of Ishtar. It's like, I don't know, maybe Ishtar is a symbol of the mother complex for gay men. Although Ishtar is the great nurturer throughout the story, when she falls in love, she seeks to engulf Gilgamesh, and when she is spurned, it brings out her spiteful revenge. It is a severe challenge to establish relationship with the powers of the unconscious by entering the shamanic path, because the archetypes, the spirits encountered thereon, are not merely good beings. Quote, just as all archetypes have a positive, favorable right side that points upwards, so also they have one that points downwards. End quote. It's from Jung. The intent of psyche can be both beneficial and malevolent. It is the process of individuation by which this profound opposition is transformed within individual personality into a centered wholeness. And in this way, the gods, too, are enabled to develop. It's an interesting idea that, like in the answer to Job, that not only do we develop the individuation process, but so do the archetypes. At the time, it is destructive. Ishtar's rage is still serving the initiatory process for Gilgamesh. In forcing Anu to create the bull of heaven, Ishtar gives shape to Gilgamesh's old demon for a third time. His instinctual nature renewed in yet a more awesome, terrifying form of phallic brutality. Enkidu opposed Gilgamesh at the gate, but their union brought forth Humbaba. The death of Humbaba brings about a dark expression of libido to match that of triumphant solar heroes. The awesome bull is like a negative form of God, of the great sky father, the power of the center reversed, an aspect of the self which Gilgamesh has to face once he begins a relationship to it. Through this challenge, Gilgamesh and Enkidu reach the sun's zenith. Without the direct intervention of Shamash, they overcome the celestial bull and offer his heart to the sun. Now their power is greater than ever, supreme in all the land. For, quote, the hero becomes equal to the sun. He renews himself, end quote, through the integration of phallic libido. Only now, at this high point, has Gilgamesh been strengthened and readied by the unconscious for the main part of his journey. Quote, animals represent instinct, and also the prohibition of instinct, so that man becomes human through conquering his animal nature, end quote. That's from Jung. Yet at the same time, quote, the killing of the bull is a secret and furtive overcoming of the law, and hence a criminal usurpation of justice. Since the better is always the enemy of the good, every drastic innovation is an infringement of what is traditionally right, and may sometimes even be a crime punishable by death. That's again Jung. In this way, the individuation has always been known as opus contra naturam, the work against nature. Now, a fourth form of the old enemy can appear from out of the spirit world. Now that the boastful companions have so well approached the majesty of the sun, let them partake fully in the journey of the sun. As Jung comments, quote, every psychological extreme secretly contains its own opposite, and the more extreme a position is, the more easily may we expect an anti-andromeda. a conversion of something into its opposite. The best is most threatened with some devilish perversion just because it has done the most to suppress evil. It's an important concept in Jungian thought, the anti-Andromeda, or the turning of the thing on its opposite. By following the libidinal son, Gilgamesh has been seduced onto the shamanic road of initiation. Lord Enki's reported, Lord Enki's way, the way of the goatfish. That's important. We'll see why later. The way of the goatfish. Quote, the symbol in which the sun re-enters the yearly cycle at the time of the winter solstice is Capricorn, end quote. Meaning, quote, the sun mounts like a goat to the tops of the highest mountains and then plunges into the depths of the sea like a fish. The idea of the goatfish is about the anti-Andromeda, or the opposites. It would be a mistake to see the death of Enkidu as a punishment, for it is a necessary event, requiring only the right pretext to bring it about. As Jung notes, the libido is, quote, not only a ceaseless forward movement and ending will for life, but like the sun, libido also wills its own descent, its own involution, end quote. That's Jung. Enkidu has brought the source of life to Gilgamesh. He is the manifestation of the soul. But to gain his full initiation, Gilgamesh must journey to the spirit world. And how is he to do that when it is a mystery whose terrors make those of Humbaba and the bull puny by comparison? Unless the symbol of life-joy itself, should sink into the spirit world and guide him there and then below as it did above. When a new star fell to earth and became a man, this was not the completion of its transformations. Enkidu's death initiates the sacrifice of libido by which descent to the other world is obtained. Quote, the act of sacrifice is a fertilization, end quote. That's Jung. Just as Gilgamesh was confronted with the negative side of the self and the bull of heaven, so he must face the dark side of the soul relationship, its loss, to be stripped of all his majesty, then of his dignity, finally of the last shreds of any self-regard or hope. In this way is he finally purified of his immature selfishness once and for all, and only then can he securely serve the will of God consciously, humbly, faithfully. Only then is he trustworthy to receive the role of spiritual initiate, friend of God. Enki says nothing in the heavenly debate after the bull is killed, but there is no need. As surely as night follows day, the ache in his belly will inspire Gilgamesh to find the gate of the sun, to cross the dark tunnel within. Romantic love builds up relationship to the soul, and ultimately the soul is to be sought inside. So just as the soul figure emerged from out of unconscious psyche to rescue the king, now he sinks back down again to bring the key to a further maturity and a greater achievement. By sacrificing these valued objects, quote, of desire and possession, the instinctual desire or libido is given up in order that it be regained in a new form, end quote. That's from Jung. So I think we're doing okay for time because there's there's 20 pages, and if I'm reading right, each 10 pages is 20 minutes. But we just finished that section called the Bull of Heaven and the Loss of the Soul, and that is that really gay-centered integration of Jungian ideas that the inflation constellates a compensatory deflation, and it's the loss of soul that sends us on a journey to actually find the soul figure within. Next section is called the Journey to the Spirit World. Only after Gilgamesh had known a soul relationship would he be capable of yearning for it. This is how romantic love calls back to the beginning, to seek the lost soul once known in a prior wholeness. The quote, the search for the understanding heart, end quote, becomes the central metaphor in the imagination of Gilgamesh in the second half of his story. The search leads to the spirit world, into the unconscious. Gilgamesh could never be brought to sacrifice himself on his own. Only because of Enkidu can he do so. This essentially is what occurs on his journey to the underworld. He is led to give up his libido, quote, a human self-sacrifice, a renunciation of egohood, end quote, for the sake of his beloved. Thus, the nature of true romantic love, to give your life for the other. The same occurred to the Greek twins, the Dioscuri. This is from Karenine, quote, Polyptychus ran to his brother and found him at the last gasp. He raised his voice to Zeus and besought his father that he might die also. Zeus approached, and he gave Polypticus his choice, either to live henceforth on Olympus or to pass one day under the earth with his brother. The next would Castor in the celestial palace with the gods. What Polypticus chose was to share light and darkness too, forever. End quote. By vanquishing the bull of heaven, Gilgamesh and Enkidu reach a triumphant pinnacle. And that, quote, highest summit of life can be expressed as death is a well-known fact. For any growing beyond oneself means death. So, it's a really profound idea that this highest summit of life can be expressed as death is a well-known fact. Thus,